Let me start this episode off by apologizing for the last episode. There was a major audio snafu. I broke the golden rule of not double checking the audio before I was finished, and then it was both on the way that I record the audio and the way that I record the video, and they were both screwed up, so the backup didn't work. I screwed that whole thing up. And for somebody who does this for a living, it's kind of inexcusable. So I apologize for that, but I didn't really have time to redo the podcast, and I don't think I stuttered once during the entire episode. So I said, you know what, I'm just going to leave it. I'm going to try to fix it the best I can. I know it was terrible. I apologize that you had to deal with that. Everything seems to be, at least for now, back to normal. It might sound a little hollower, a little more empty. That's because there's like nothing in this room with me right now. I'm in the midst of moving or getting ready to move. And so things have been hectic around here. So hopefully these sound panels that are the only thing left on my wall are actually working. Either way, let's get into it. Hi, hello, and welcome into another episode of the Ball Don't Lie podcast. My name is Austin Elmore. We have a lot to talk about as far as the Bengals are concerned. Let's start with the preseason game number 1 in Philadelphia against the Eagles. Finally, football is back, and so too is that cough. It's going to be here, so you might as well just deal with it. That's what I'm trying to do. I think I've determined it's just coming in and out of the air conditioning all the time, and it's so hot outside, and the weather, I'll blame it on the weather. I feel fine. It's just sometimes when I'm stringing those sentences together, it ends like that. But we'll be okay. Either way, let's start with the game against the Eagles. The big story, Joe Burrow and the starters are going to play. How long are they going to play? And is everybody going to be healthy? As I said in the last episode, 2 rules. Don't get hurt and don't overreact. Well, I don't plan on doing any overreacting to the Bengals. I don't plan on doing any overreacting to that game. It is just one game. The good news is, with the exception of one player, the Bengals really avoided any major injury, most notably to Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and the Bengals offensive line. So that's the good thing. That one injury was safety Geno Stone. Geno came out after 4 plays. He's dealing with a soft tissue injury. More about him coming up in just a little bit. But when you look at it from an offensive perspective, how could you not love what you saw? Joe Burrow and the Bengals offense marched down the field, scored 2 touchdowns, got out of there. They saw a few different things from Philadelphia. They saw some stunts. They saw some blitzes. They saw them drop 7, drop 8. Like, all together, you got a good mix of different ways to attack the Bengals offense from a defensive perspective. You weren't going up against Philadelphia starters, but you were able to operate the offense efficiently. You had 1 penalty that was called that brought back a touchdown, but it was kind of a bad call because Lucas Patrick, who started at right guard, slipped and fell. They called it a chop block or a hit below the waist, whatever it was. Not great, but the Bengals rebounded and scored quickly after that. And the most notable part for me is the offensive line. You know me, I've been hammering this for a long time. I thought Dylan Fairchild held up pretty well. There's 2 ways to look at it when you're going up against backups. Number 1 is if they perform poorly against backups, then you feel like you're really in trouble. Number 2 is if they perform well against backups, then okay, it looks how it's supposed to look. I saw someone talking about Shedeur Sanders with this mentality the other day, which is if it looks the way it's supposed to look, that should be your measuring stick for the preseason. And I love that. If they're performing poorly against backups, well then that's not what it's supposed to look like. If you are a talented player and expected to be a starter and you're performing well against backup caliber players, that's what it's supposed to look like. And hopefully next week he'll get a little bit more of a test, Dylan Fairchild, and really the whole offensive line against the starters for the Washington Commanders. Don't know exactly if that's going to be the case or not yet. I don't know Washington's plan, but long story short, it looked the way it was supposed to look. There was 2 times when Burrow almost got hit. Once was on the opening drive on a 3rd down. He got the ball out right as a runner was coming up on him. He didn't get hit, didn't get nicked. Everything was clean. And then there was a free blitzer on the 5th play of the 2nd drive. They had a 0 blitz. Burrow recognized it, got the ball out quickly. It was a turn and burn for Jamar Chase, 36-yard touchdown. easy does it for the Bengals offense. So you really can't complain much about the offense, and certainly the starting offense and the way that they looked. To stick on the offensive side of the ball, the rest of the group wasn't great. Specifically, Jake Browning. Jake Browning did not look good. He did not look comfortable. He looked like he was bordering on aggressive and reckless with some of his passes. He did end up throwing an interception. But historically, Jake Browning doesn't look great in the preseason. That's nothing abnormal for Jake. That's pretty common from what we've seen from him in the past. But when he left the game, I was impressed with Desmond Ridder. Desmond Ridder played well for the Bengals offense. Maybe that competition's a little closer than we think. I'm not saying it is, but maybe that's something we should make space for. Des said in an interview before the game that he had 75, 80% of the offense totally down, which to me is very impressive for a guy who got here just a couple of weeks ago. If that's the case, and if maybe he fits and his NFL experience outweighs that of Jake Browning, maybe it makes sense to take a longer, better, harder look at Desmond Ridder potentially challenging Jake Browning. Not saying it's going to happen, but the way those results were after Philadelphia, again, not trying to overreact, but I do think that's something to earmark moving forward, which earmarking it moving forward it may have become my favorite phrase of this entire podcast. I don't know. Anyways, that was that. Now we go to the defense. Did not look good for the Bengals starting defense against the Eagles backup defense. When I think of that performance, I think of space. It was very easy for Jahan Dotson and the Eagles backup wide receivers to create space. They easily got separation against the Bengals cornerbacks. There was not much of a pass rush whatsoever. When there was a pass rush, they couldn't disengage blocks, Miles Murphy specifically. They were gashed in the run game. At one point, 2 defensive tackles in the same gap, and what appeared to be a miscommunication or the wrong call. Something went wrong. That gashed for a long run for Philadelphia. It did not look like a defense that was wholly prepared. And I know this is maybe something that's kind of strong to throw out there for a podcast like this. I don't know. And I at times hesitate to say it, but I do think it's how I see it. They look soft. The Bengals defensive line to me looks soft. I can count 2-3 plays from that Philly game that really stand out to me where it felt like they were physical, they were aggressive, they were setting the tone. One of them happened down by the goal line. Miles Murphy gets his hands up into the chest of his tackle, knocks him back, moves down the line of scrimmage, makes the tackle before the goal line. That is textbook when it comes to defending the run. But we didn't see enough of that. Shamar Stewart had a similar play, and Shamar had a couple of good plays where he was rushing the passer, speeding up the quarterback. I think from that standpoint, it's a net positive on the way that Shamar Stewart performed. He wasn't great. He was up and down. He had a couple of rookie-like moments. But overall, I think there's a lot to be desired about the Bengals defense. Now, it's important to note, Dax Hill didn't play, BJ Hill didn't play, Cam Taylor-Britt didn't play, Trey Hendrickson didn't play, and Geno Stone left after 4 snaps. So 5 of your 6 starters essentially didn't play in the game whatsoever. So take all that and all the results and anything anybody wants to say with a grain of salt because you're missing 5 guys that would typically be on the field with you. However, I didn't see enough aggression. I didn't see enough physicality. I didn't see enough of an attitude from Joseph Osai, from Miles Murphy, from Chris Jenkins. Saw a little bit of it from McKinley Jackson. Saw a little bit of it from Shamar Stewart. But overall, I just felt like, I don't like the way this looks. I don't like the way this feels. And it feels like they're the ones that's like, instead of delivering the blow, they're taking the blow and then seeing what happens after that. And that's no way to be a defensive line. It just feels like the physicality and the edge that you want your defensive line to play with, the Bengals aren't playing with enough. And that's what concerns me about the defensive line after game number 1. Hopefully they see that and can fix that. And maybe it's just first game jitters and you're nervous and you're, maybe a little bit timid. You don't want to get hurt. Who knows? Who knows what it is? But now that you got one under your belt, let's hope that the Bengals can flush that and perform better going into next week against Washington. So they don't actually play a game this week. They will play next Monday night, a week from tonight, on Monday Night Football against the Washington Commanders in Washington. And it's maybe a good thing because the Bengals are battling some injuries. Let's check the practice report from over the weekend. Yesterday, Jermaine Burton did not practice with an undisclosed injury. He was not at practice whatsoever. Geno Stone, as I mentioned earlier, has a soft tissue injury. He did not practice Saturday or Sunday. He is considered week to week, so probably won't get an update on him again until next week. Joseph Osai left practice on Saturday, did not practice on Sunday. BJ Hill did not practice in either one of those. I'm getting a little bit concerned about BJ Hill. I know he's coming off of an off-season injury, and they're easing him in, and they're not, trying to push it too much. But I'm a little bit worried that that's something that could linger for a little while now that we're less than a month away into the season, and BJ hasn't been practicing very much at all. Mike Gesicki did not practice either of those 2 days. He didn't play in the game as well. He continues to manage an injury, so hopefully that's turning around soon. So notable that those guys not practicing. There was a few other guys, maybe some backup players that weren't practicing as much. But the big question is, what does the depth look like for this team? Whether that's the offensive line, the defensive line, and most notably now, the safety room. Geno Stone, supposed to be the starting safety, injured after 4 plays, has come out and has missed practice. They've been rotating in Dejon Anthony, a second-year corner out of Ole Miss, and Tyson Anderson, who's primarily a special teamer and a really good one, out of Toledo. It was notable that on Sunday, or it was Saturday, P.J. Jules stepped up and had a good performance and played pretty well against the Eagles as well, to the point where in practice this weekend, P.J. Jules got some first-team reps. He had an interception with the second team, was immediately put in with the first team. Depth for me in the secondary is a concern for this team. There are still some guys out there that could be signed. I wonder if the Bengals will consider doing that. Now, other people said that based off the way the defense played the other night in Philly, that maybe it was a good night for Trey Hendrickson and indicative of the fact that they need him, they need his physicality, they need his ability. And on one hand, I think that's true. And yes, they need Trey, but also the defense looked exactly like that even with Trey last year. But when you're kind of running a vanilla system, which they were against Philadelphia, it requires players to win one-on-one. And they weren't winning one-on-one. If there's one thing we know Trey can do, it's win one-on-one. He can be a guy who can rush the passer. He can beat the guy across from him. He can come up with that big sack when you need him the most. And so in that sense, yes, it highlights the ability that Trey is the only guy on the defense that can consistently win one-on-one matchups. Those other guys cannot, specifically on the defensive line. That's a concern, and I hope that the learning point for this, whether that's the players or the coaches or Al Golden, is that, okay, here's what players do well. Here's what we can learn from on this tape against Philadelphia. And here's how I can adjust the scheme to put them in better positions to where I'm not relying on multiple people to win one-on-one matchups every single snap. Maybe the scheme, maybe the blitz, maybe the look creates a more favorable matchup, and I'm not relying on winning one-on-ones. Maybe that's something that can be gained from the way they performed against Philadelphia. And I think it's notable that they've been rotating some guys in through that secondary and giving a few more chances. DJ Ivey was one of those guys, performed well leading up to Philadelphia, did not perform well against Philadelphia. So hopefully that's a blip on the radar for DJ, who has actually held his own pretty well against some of the Bengals' better receivers. Philadelphia, I would take the Bengals' backup receivers over Philadelphia's receivers. Hopefully that was just a bad night for DJ Ivey. Bengals keep practicing all week this week before they head over to Washington for preseason game number 2. And I'll do my best to have you covered. I don't know if I'm going to be making podcasts this week or not, just because of my schedule and my move and all that, but I'm going to try like hell to make it happen. Thank you so much for listening. If you liked what you heard, you can hear me weekdays noon to 3, ESPN 1530, co-host a show with Tony Pike there called Cincy 360. You can also follow me anywhere and everywhere on social media at Auty Elmore, AUTYELMORE. Thank you so much for watching and listening to this episode of Ball Don't Lie.